Welcome to the Press One for Nick podcast. My name is Nick Glimsdahl. My guest this week is Tamara Myles. She is an author, speaker, and researcher. Tamara helps leaders design systems and create cultures that enable individuals and teams to thrive. Tamara, welcome to the Press One for Nick podcast.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. So one question I ask every single guest at the very beginning is, what's one thing people might not know about you?
Very few people know that I walked a marathon a couple of years ago during the COVID pandemic.
Okay.
We were all, like everybody in the world, like cooped up at home, husband, kids, dogs, like everyone at home all the time. And I wanted to just go out, spend some time alone in nature. And so I walked a marathon listening to an audiobook through the beautiful trails of Concord, Mass, where I live. And it was a really great experience.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's always fun. I think some of that time I had the opportunity to run in college, and some of the times where I had the opportunity to just go out on my own and run, you had that time to reflect and think and process instead of letting the world kind of consume you. So I bet you had a lot to come back to, that a lot of treasure that you came back to after that marathon.
For sure. And there's so much research and evidence that spending time in nature is very replenishing for our resilience, for our mental chatter. And it was just like a really meaningful experience for me. I mean, I was really sore the next day, but it was worth it.
Yeah, it's usually the next day or the next 2 days is where you're just like, why did I do that? That was a mistake. And then, a couple of days later, you're like, yeah, it wasn't too bad.
It's
okay.
I would do it again. I would just have better shoes and better socks.
Note to self. Good stuff. So you recently came out with an article on Fast Company called "The Toxic Workplaces Are a Threat to Employee Health: How to Make Yours Anti-Toxic." I read the article and I think it's great, and I want to dig into it a little bit, and then go on from there. But it says that the U.S. Surgeon General made history calling out toxic workplaces in connection with one of the worst mental health crises the U.S. has ever seen. Why is that?
So one of the silver linings of the pandemic is this renewed call for an interest in workplaces being forces for well-being, right? So we spend about a third of our lives at work. And there was a lot of research, including from Gallup, that shows that out of all the dimensions of our life, our workplace well-being is the most impactful to our overall well-being. And so when we spend time in toxic workplaces, that affects not only our time at work, but what we bring home and how we interact with our families and how we interact with our communities. And so it was really incredible that the Surgeon General and his team put out that call for workplaces to become a source of well-being, and the framework that they provided was really great and research-based, and a lot of really great tips and suggestions there.
So how should companies, when it comes to well-being and mental health, how should companies address that today?
So in my article, I provide some steps, and the first step is to take a real close look at your culture and to be honest about whether or not there is toxicity in the culture. So toxic workplaces, according to researchers at MIT who looked at millions of Glassdoor reviews, they were looking at causes of turnover, and they found that toxic cultures are the number one cause for turnover, 10 times more than the second cause, 10 times more important than benefits and compensation, which is also hugely important, right? But if you think about it, I don't know if you've ever worked in an environment that was toxic, and I have, and it's just really hard to go to work and to do your best job when you're worried about saying the wrong thing, or there's all this gossiping going on, or you don't feel included, right? And so that's the first step, is to weed out toxicity. But that's not enough, right? It's not enough to be non-toxic, because as a positive psychology researcher and instructor, I believe So the positive psychology field is based on the idea that it's not enough to eliminate pathology, right? When you eliminate the negative, you only bring people to neutral. And while that's very important, that is not enough. That is not the same as enabling thriving. You want to be north of neutral. You want to be in the positive. And so, yes, you want to eliminate toxicity, but that's only going to create neutral work environments. And everybody wants to work at a place that's thriving, that enables you to thrive, that pushes you to do better. So while detoxing is the first step, it's not enough. Then you have to build on that and create environments where people can learn and grow and feel a sense of belonging and know that they are valued, that the work that they do matters. And that's where the research that I've been doing with my partner and other partners for the past 3 years, that really comes in, because we find that meaningful work and cultures that enable people to feel a sense of meaning at work really enable individuals to thrive.
It's interesting. So meaningful work, maybe I want to touch on that just a little bit. What does that mean to you?
So for me personally, and it's hard for me to separate, my personal experience from what I know and what I found in the research. But what makes work meaningful for me is when I get to see the impact of the work that I do. So if I go to a training and I just did a leadership retreat a couple weeks ago, where I was in a room with 150 leaders, and I was taking them through some of the research and the practices that we uncovered. And then to have them come to me after, at the back of the room and say, wow, that was really impactful. You mentioned this thing, like, I'm going to do this tomorrow. And I know that that's going to change how I lead, so to know that, those 3 hours you spend with a team, that moved the needle for a leader, and he's going to do things differently, and it's going to have an impact on his team. Or I got an email recently from a woman who read my book and said, I loved your book. These specific things changed my life, right? So knowing the impact of the work that I do is really, really meaningful to me.
So how does that make you feel when you get those accolades about the work and the time and effort that you're putting into the research?
It's a really great question. I think I feel a deep sense of gratitude to be able to do the work that I do. And I also feel really energized and inspired to continue doing the work that I do. I think that's where my sense of engagement comes in, right? Where I am driven to continue learning and then translating some academic data into actionable frameworks for leaders, which is what I love doing. And it also helps me get through the parts of my work that I don't love as much, but that I have to do, right? Because then I remember that, and I remember the bigger picture, and it helps me do it anyways.
So this is one more question on gratitude. We talked prior, and you mentioned the importance of a gratitude letter. What does that mean to that person when you hear or learn more about somebody and they say, I'm so thankful for you because? What does that do when somebody sends you a gratitude letter?
Yeah. So just to give a little bit of information about what the gratitude letter is, right? So there's a lot of research on gratitude and the importance of cultivating a gratitude practice for your own benefit, but also the effects of expressing gratitude and appreciation to others. And so the field of positive psychology has developed multiple gratitude interventions, and the most well-known is this gratitude letter, which is about reflecting on somebody who's had a big impact on your life, who maybe you haven't expressed yet to them what it meant, whatever they did, and then writing a gratitude letter to them, expressing that. And it could be a teacher you had in high school who really unlocked your potential, saw something in you that you didn't even know you had, and push you to do better. It could be a colleague at work who stepped in and helped you in a project. And maybe for them, it was just part of how they operate. But for you, it changed your life for that week, because you were able to do other things. So whatever it is, reflecting, then writing the letter. And then the next step is actually sending the letter, right? And so the research shows that not only does that have huge well-being benefits for you, for taking the time to reflect and express, but also for the receiver. I mean, think about it. Have you ever been the recipient of an email, even if it's not the traditional gratitude letter, but an email expressing appreciation or gratitude for something you did, and specifically citing what it is that you did and the impact it had? It really means a lot. And some of the research on organizations shows that peer-to-peer recognition, so when a colleague expresses gratitude to another colleague, it has a causal relationship on the strength of their connection, up to 55% increase in the connection that you feel with that colleague by receiving that appreciation and expressing that appreciation. And that is such a huge part of meaningful work, is the community at work, feeling a sense of belonging. So that can really make work meaningful, expressing and receiving appreciation and gratitude.
Like that. So for my listeners, it sounds like it's good to take that time to reflect, to understand what people, even as we're coming into the end of the year, what people have impacted you at that time. And maybe it's time to take that and write that gratitude letter to those 3, 4, or 5 people who've impacted you, to show them what they've meant to you. I think that's a great idea. So going back to the article real quick, you mentioned there are 3 C's when it comes to meaningful work. Can you touch on those?
Yes, definitely. Excuse me. So my research shows, my research partner and I, one of my closest friends, Wes Adams, we started this research in graduate school because we really wanted to understand the leader's role in making work meaningful. Most of the research that had been done to date really explored the individual's role in increasing their own sense of meaning at work, which is really important because what's meaningful to me might be very different than what's meaningful to you, right? And so it is a very individual experience, but we suspected that leaders played a big role in that experience. And so we set out to explore it. And now we've been doing this research for over 3 years, and we have additional research partners that are amazing. And we found a suite of practices, leadership practices that increase the sense of meaning at work. And Wes and I have distilled these practices into the 3 C's because they fall broadly under these 3 main categories. And so the first one is contribution, which is knowing the impact that you have on other people, on something outside yourself. So it could be your colleagues, it could be the purpose of your organization, it could be the community that you serve. And so a leader's role is to make that impact visible, because when you do that, people understand why the work they do matters, how they add value. And so the example I mentioned about somebody sending me an email, letting me know that, that my book changed their lives or something like that, that's impact, that's contribution right there. And that is the C, that's the one that people most often think of when they think of meaningful work, is this sense of purpose, right? But that alone is not enough to make work meaningful. It's very important, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So that's where the other 2 C's come in. The second C is this sense of community. We all want to be included, feel a sense of belonging in the communities that we work, have friends at work, feel like we are valued, we are cared for, and people care about us. And so there's a suite of practices leaders can do to increase the sense of community at work. And then finally, the last C is challenge. We all want to learn and grow and develop. That's a human need, is development and learning. And so when we're in work environments where leaders see potential in us, even beyond what we can see for ourselves at the moment, but they know that we can do something hard, and they give us those assignments and push us to do hard things, but also offer us support to do those things, we thrive, right? Work becomes really meaningful. Think about something really hard you did at work, and you did it well, and you had support. You remember those things. You remember those hard things that you did and you conquered. Maybe you stumbled, you failed, you learned, you picked yourself back up, and you kept going, and then you succeeded.
I love those. So it's the contribution, the challenge, and then the community. When it comes to the leaders, I think that's where meaningful work starts. It starts at the top, and now obviously it goes back and forth. And you need to have buy-in, you need to have community, you need to have a shared purpose. But when it comes to leaders, what are the leadership behaviors to make work meaningful?
So there's so many, and I think the most important one, and I mentioned that in the article as well, in the anti-toxic article, is to role model the behaviors. The fastest way that leaders can kill meaning at work instantly and very hard to recover from is to say one thing and do another, right? To not walk the talk. And so having organizational values that are clear to say, here at this company, we value this, and this is what it means. This is what integrity here at our organization looks like. These are the sets of behaviors. And then actually living up to those behaviors, role modeling that. And if there's conflict between two values and you're choosing one over another in a specific situation, to be transparent about that. To say, I know we talk about community and customers first. And in this decision, we lean in customers first, even though, because of this, and just like transparency, communicating clearly. When people see that you uphold the values, that's number one. So role modeling behaviors is very important. The other one is building community. And we've uncovered this like 4 A's of belonging where the practices fall into. So one is appreciation, which we talked about earlier. So building a practice, a community, a culture where people appreciate each other, where peers can recognize each other, where you are recognizing your people, that's really important. And one of the companies that we interviewed for our study is HubSpot, which is a tech company headquartered in Cambridge, Mass. And they have a really strong culture. And one of the things they do is a practice they called gratitude jar. So at the beginning of every year, they have employees fill little slips, I think within teams, of little things that they're grateful for about each person. And each person gets a little jar with these gratitude slips on it. And then through the year, if they're having a bad day or they want to reflect or they're not really sure, if people care about them, they can open that gratitude jar and read those slips. And that really is meaningful. And that's just one way. Other leaders we work with have a reminder on their calendar every Friday to send out at least 5 emails, thanking people, recognizing people. Others start meetings with appreciation. So that's both role modeling and appreciating in one meeting. So there's many ways to do appreciation. The other A is alignment, and that's really being clear about the purpose of the organization, the values. So being in a community of shared values really increases the sense of belonging, right? When everybody is in it together and cares about the same things you do, it increases sense of trust, but it also lets you know how you can add value right away. So we talked about alignment, appreciation. Another A is amity, which is the same as friendship. So building opportunities for people to make friends at work, to do things together, to develop their relationship beyond just a work relationship is really important. There's research that supports that having a best friend at work really increases your sense of overall well-being at work, your likelihood to stay with the company, right? And it makes sense. We all want to have relationships with the people we spend most of our day with. And then finally, the last A is authenticity. So creating environments where people can show up authentically, can be themselves if they want to. You're not forcing them to, but you're creating psychological safety so people can challenge your ideas respectfully, so that they can show parts of their personality that they want to at work. And that's not only invited to, but also celebrated when they do. And one example that we have from our research, actually, we started the research right when COVID hit. And one of the other companies that we studied was Zappos. And they said that when COVID hit, they put together a celebration committee to help employees all over the country feel connected and feel seen. And, it was in the spring of 2020, so it was graduation time. And so they recognized families that had teens that were graduating high school, and they sent celebration packages to their homes and celebrated their graduations. And that's an example of being seen for who you are beyond your professional self, right? Recognizing that you have a family, that your kids are not having the graduation experience they expected, and still making it matter, making it meaningful.
Such good nuggets that I don't have time to completely unpack. But a question that I have based off of that is, so you're creating this well-being in your organization. You're the leader who's creating these behaviors to show and to celebrate the people that are there, and to encourage them and to reward them at the right time. What does that well-being do? Does it create a cascading effect in the community, or what does that look like for that one person, and it's that ripple effect, or is there something else?
That's such a great question. Yes, there is a ripple effect. There's research on social contagion that shows that one person's level of well-being influences up to 3 degrees of separation. So that means that if I experience higher well-being at work, I come back to my house and I am feeling better. I have higher positive emotions, right? Higher engagement, higher sense of meaning in life, higher sense of accomplishment. And so that translates to how I engage with my family. But not only that, my family then has a higher sense of well-being, and then the way they engage with their friends, and the way that their friends engage with their friends. So that's like 3 degrees of separation of a cascading ripple effect. So I truly believe that by focusing on employee well-being and thriving at work, we can impact community well-being. We can increase a sense of community thriving. Marty Seligman, who is the founder of the field of, the father of positive psychology, he called, his big vision was to have 51% of the population in the world thriving by 2051. We are definitely not there yet. There's been a big dip in well-being, post-pandemic. But I believe that the way that we can achieve that is through increasing well-being at work.
Yeah, what's the analogy of the guy walking the beach, or the kid walking the beach, and he's throwing, or he's slinging the stars back into the water, and he's like, the dad looks at him, he's like, son, you can't, what are you doing? He's like, you can't save all of them. He's like, but I can save this one, and I can save this one, and I can save this one. And I think the same is true with this community, is the more that you can focus on the well-being for that next person and that next person and the next person, that's only going to have that cascading effect for the community and potentially get to that 51%.
Absolutely. I love that. I don't think I had heard that before.
Yeah. So I wrap up every single podcast with 2 questions. And the first question is, what book or person has influenced you the most in the past year?
Gosh, it's such a great question. I read so many great books this year. It is hard to pick one, but I will. So there's a book that I read every year. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And every year when I read it, I learn something again, something different that I hadn't, that hadn't stuck with me from the year before. Of course, his book is very relevant to the work I do and the research I do about meaningful work. And so I would say Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is the book that again changed my life this year, and I will read it again in 2023.
That's great. And then the last question I have for you, if you could leave a note to all customer service or customer experience professionals, it's going to hit everybody's desk Monday at 8 a.m. What would it say?
Thank you. It would say thank you. I recently, 2 weeks ago, had such a wonderful experience with customer service at my local telephone store. I went in and I was doing a big switch with accounts, and it was very complicated. And Andrew, who was the customer service person who helped me was just so kind and helpful. And I had to go back to the store like multiple times just because it was a very complicated move. And he said to me, he's like, thank you for being so nice. We often get people here that every time they have an issue, they come in and they take it out on us and they get so upset and they don't treat us well. And I know it hasn't been easy, this transition for you. And I appreciate you being so patient. And I was like, I know that we're all doing the best we can. And I really appreciate all your help. And it broke my heart a little bit to know that so many people in customer service are out there all day, every day, doing the best they can. And they're not being treated well right now. And I guess what I would want to say is thank you. Thank you for doing what you do, for showing up, for trying your best every day. I appreciate it.
Great advice. Tamara, what's the best way for my listeners to connect with you, to find your articles, to follow your stuff?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to. That's where I post, my articles and my new ideas, any research that comes out. And people connect with me and ask me questions. They message me and I get back to them. So that's the best way to stay in touch.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed it and wish you nothing but success.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it as well.